So, Charlie Kirk's assassination. I want to take some time before coming out with this video because in the moment, I wouldn't have been able to add anything of value to the conversation. I was caught up in that negative feedback loop, you know? And I don't want to simply feed into it. I wanted to have a broader point, a real point, and try to offer you a decent perspective. We'll see how it goes, because what can you even say, really? You know, this affected me a great deal. I'm still having a hard time putting this into words. There was a clear moral weight to it, obviously, right? I mean, we're talking about a political assassination here. But for so many of us, something in the air changed that day, and the gravity of it was something else entirely. I had this feeling that just kind of sat there in the pit of my stomach. I was struck by a powerful sense of disbelief, perhaps? I don't know if that's the correct word, because as I say that, I don't think we should feel disbelief at all. This sort of political violence is the logical conclusion to a decades-long demonization campaign by the left. Everybody with some kind of foresight could have predicted this outcome, but I don't think many of us would have thought that it would have ended up being Charlie Kirk. It's just crazy. He was a good guy, a moderate voice, and all I can say is they effed up. If they believed that this would create some sort of chilling effect and cause people on the right to back down, well, they're finding out that's not going to happen. You have to take up the cause and speak your mind even more. And by perpetrating this act, his legacy is going to live on. He'll continue influencing good people to stand up for what they believe in, and this will reverberate for many generations to come. I'm certain of that. But the main thing I want to focus on is the response. From the media framing to the people dancing on the grave and the psychological principles behind the growing assassination culture. Because it illuminates a certain trajectory. And I think it's safe to say that things will get worse before they get better. I mean, look around. Nothing is calming down. Even in the aftermath, there's been bomb threats at TPUSA, vigils and memorials have been destroyed, and 2 other far-left attacks, one at ABC News and another at a wedding where the shooter screamed, "Free Palestine." And unfortunately, I have to add one more event to our list, and that's because, as I was working on this video, we had another attack on an ICE facility in Dallas, in which the suspect shot a handful of people from a nearby rooftop and left anti-ICE messages on his bullet casings. But on top of that, as with all of these recent cases, the politicians fomented this situation as well.
Every single ICE agent who's engaged in this aggressive overreach, no matter what it takes, no matter how long it takes, will of course be identified. This is not the 1930s.
Secret police who are masked, who are intimidating, who are scaring people. These Gestapo-like tactics.
This is Gestapo-like behavior.
Donald Trump's modern-day Gestapo is scooping folks up off the streets.
When you compare the old films of the Gestapo grabbing people off the streets of Poland, it does look like a Gestapo operation.
You posted on social media that, quote, ICE is acting like a terrorist force.
ICE agents, they are coming and kidnapping and disappearing people on the streets of the United States.
That's happening in the United States of America. Masked men jumping out of unmarked cars, people disappearing, no due process, no oversight, zero accountability, happening in the United States of America today. People ask, well, is authoritarianism, you're being hyperbolic? Bull, we're being hyperbolic. These are not just authoritarian tendencies. These are authoritarian actions by an authoritarian government.
Look, I want to get back to the FBI director, Kash Patel, and what he posted. It's a long post. I won't read all of it, but it's important because you have those unspent shell casings off to the right. I said unspent shell casings off to the right, anti-ICE. And here's what he wrote. This morning, just before 7 a.m. local time, an individual fired multiple rounds at a Dallas, Texas ICE facility, killing one, wounding several others before taking his own life. Now, an update to that, there are 2 people who've perished now, 2 people killed in this, and one still wounded and recovering. FBI, DHS, ATF are on the ground with Dallas PD and state authorities. I'll skip down. These despicable, politically motivated attacks against law enforcement are not a one-off. We are only miles from Prairie Land, Texas, where just 2 months ago an individual ambushed a separate ICE facility.
All right, so yeah, one more to the list, but let's get back to the video. First of all, we have to understand that this tension has been building for a very, very long time. Let's take a trip down memory lane. Now, I just want to focus on the Trump era, the last 10 years or so, because these clips go back all the way to 2015.
I just don't even know why there aren't uprisings all over the country, and maybe there will be.
People need to start taking to the streets. This is a dictator.
You know, there needs to be unrest in the streets for as long as there's unrest in our lives.
Enemies of the state.
Show me where it says that protests are supposed to be polite and peaceful.
Do something about your dad's immigration practices, you feckless.
When they go low, we kick.
How do you resist the temptation to run up and wring her neck?
The biggest terror threat in this country is white men, most of them radicalized right up to the right.
I thought he should have punched him in the face. I said, even if you lost, he insulted your wife.
Yes.
He came down the escalator and called Mexicans rapists and murderers. He said, well, what do you think I should have done? I said, I think you should have punched him in the face and then gotten out of the race. You would have been a hero.
I'd like to punch him in the face. I said if we were in high school, I'd take him behind the gym and beat the hell out of him.
Punch some people in the face!
When was the last time an actor assassinated a president?
They're still going to have to go out and put a bullet in Donald Trump, and that's a fact.
Look as his character is stabbed to death.
Where is John Wilkes Booth when you need him?
I have thought an awful lot about blowing up the White House.
A Missouri state senator is under investigation by the Secret Service after saying she hopes President Trump is assassinated.
I will go and take Trump out tonight.
And if you see anybody from that cabinet in a restaurant, in a department store, at a gasoline station, you get out and you create a crowd. And you push back on them. And you tell them they're not welcome anymore, anywhere.
And sadly, the domestic enemies to our voting system and our honoring our Constitution are right at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue.
They're not going to stop before Election Day in November, and they're not going to stop after Election Day. And that should be, everyone should take note of that on both levels, that this isn't, they're not going to let up, and they should not.
If you think we're rallying now, you ain't seen nothing yet.
Yeah, we've traveled pretty far down this path to hell, and now we're at a point where political assassinations are commonplace. I'm sure you guys all know the events that have transpired over the last few years, so I'm going to skip the review. But the main point, things are not going to change until we confront the deeper sickness. You know, not only do these media figures appeal to the violent tendencies of the lowest common denominator, but they prey on the psychologically inept for their rage clicks. And right after the Kirk shooting, the media reverted right back to their old tactics, pretty much immediately, framing the murder in certain ways to downplay their role in perpetuating calls to violence, running cover for the left, soulless and predictable. The media, the activists, and the talking heads initially tried to frame it as solely a right-wing problem. It didn't work. Social media has made the truth abundantly clear. They tried citing skewed data from places like the Cato Institute to make their point. Didn't work. They tried claiming it was a both sides argument. Again, didn't really work. They tried saying the shooter was MAGA or a Nick Fuentes follower. Again, didn't work. And then finally, in their desperation, they even tried to frame this creature's relationship with his transgender furry boyfriend as a touching love story, basically implying that he didn't commit the assassination out of hate, it came from a place of love. Absurd. Most people don't hate the media enough, that's for sure. Personally, I loathe them. In the videos of people celebrating the hit, it's pure delusion. The media have created a cartoon villain and people latched onto it. Their mental image of Charlie Kirk isn't grounded in anything close to reality. It's unbearably evident that these lunatics have never even watched any of his content, and they're cheering on the death of a figment of their imagination, a boogeyman cooked up by the talking heads. Out of context quotes, it's basically all they have. It's as pathetic as it is detached from reality. But to me, one of the most damning aspects of their strategy is the subversion of language. The left's been stripping language for years, turning terms like democracy into a fancy wrapper for authoritarianism. Want to push a surveillance state or start a new war? Call it protecting democracy. If you want to silence dissent, you just scream racist, bigot, fascist, or Nazi at anybody who dares to think for themselves. You know, those words used to carry weight, real gut punch meaning. Now, they're just words, hurled at anyone right to Mao Zedong, emptied of substance and weaponized to shut you up or worse. George Orwell saw it coming in 1984. Control the language, control the mind. War is peace, freedom is slavery. Sound familiar? Yeah, twisting words in pursuit of power. This is not accidental, it's a psyop, plain and simple. Psychological operations call it nudging, right? Yeah, that's just a cute term for shoving lunatics toward violence. And really, they just have to knock down that first domino, and the rest takes care of itself through social dynamics. If you label somebody a Nazi enough times, some unhinged idiot starts to think it's their duty to take them out. We've seen this play out numerous times now. Ultimately, the media and politicians know exactly what they're doing, stoking this fire for over a decade. and it's absurd to believe that they don't understand the implications. They've sculpted a political environment where violence feels righteous, where cheering on an assassination like Charlie Kirk's becomes some sort of badge of honor. You see it in the videos, the posts, the smug professors and councilmen who are dancing on the grave. These aren't people, they're empty husks, parroting media mantras, psyoped into oblivion. Yeah, empty heads repeating shitty slogans. And you should know, they won't make a distinction for you either. They would happily cheer on your death as well. Now, I did know that some political ghouls would celebrate the hit, but I didn't think there would be so many. You know, this was pretty weird to me. Someone made a chart with celebrations and tied it to their professions. Teachers, professors, nurses, and doctors were the most represented. Yeah, the people who mold minds, and people who are supposed to revere life, are some of the most insane people apparently, supporting outright murder. It's crazy. Yeah, we're surrounded by the soulless idiots to be exact, midwits who can't see the forest through the trees. You know, some Marxist thought leader, if you can even call Marxist thought leaders in the first place, as thinking has very little to do with their process. But anyway, Antonio Gramsci once said, "The old world is dying, and the new world struggles to be born. Now is the time for monsters." We're in that time right now, a world in flux. They're not just subverting language for power. They're not just being hyperbolic with their language of killing. They're birthing a world of soulless ghouls who will cheer on a murder because the TV told them it's justice. You know those people in your life clapping for this? I'm sorry to say, but they're not coming back. They're gone, lost to a machine that thrives on division and blood. George Orwell warned us, when words lose meaning, power fills the void. And right now, that void is spitting out monsters. We're seeing it in real time. You know, on a broader point, I believe everything is connected. We're in that flux moment right now on a global stage. From the global agenda happening at places like the World Economic Forum and within the halls of NATO or the EU, to the domestic strife happening all over the Western world. Kirk's murder is not an isolated act. It's a flashpoint in a broader global conflict. This domestic struggle that we're witnessing, all this violence, it's a part of a larger war. It's a battle over ideas, power, and the future, playing out in blood and rhetoric. Yeah, we need to confront the growing normalization of political violence, somehow.
We got Charlie in the neck, in the neck. We got Charlie in the neck.
Charlie Kirk just got shot in the neck. Hey, ooh, ah, ooh.
You can find the full compilations of the quote-unquote celebrations on your own time. It makes me sick. But really, I'm not sure how we confront that, as you can't appeal to the sensibilities of these people. There is no logical, moral, or reasonable argument to be made against those who have no compass. They simply revel in violence and refuse introspection. Charlie Kirk's death is yet another signal of a fractured nation, where our grievances are turning deadly more and more often. Bottom line, we have to reject the monsters among us and fight for a world where discourse, not bullets, shape our future. You know, I came across a quote recently. I'm not sure where it comes from, probably saw it in a meme or something, but it goes something like this. To them, words are just a means to deceive. And that couldn't be more prescient right now. And we have a lot of new people finally starting to see it. And that's because the assassination has laid bare a grim reality. To many in these circles, words are mere pawns in a game of manipulation. Truth is an afterthought. Their language is crafted to mislead, to inflame, and to divide. But it also reveals something deeper. It reveals their deeper contempt for the public's ability to reason. Yeah, they think you're stupid. And that raises a deeper question. If words aren't tethered to any form of sincerity, can we ever hope to discern reality? I don't know. There is hope though, because as I said, the media's kaleidoscope of half-truths has pierced the veil for a lot of new people. In this media frenzy, we're left to wonder, what becomes of truth when language bends only to deceive? A tough question to answer. You know, I often see people reference Plato's cave in this sort of situation, where shadows are intentionally used to masquerade as reality, keeping people locked up as prisoners within their carefully constructed mirage. Sounds like cable news, doesn't it? Really, the only way to stave off the gathering dark of polarization in this country, or I should say, as we're trying to find our way through this darkness, the light at the end of the path is honest discourse. Gotta have it, unapologetically. Charlie Kirk's assassination during his American comeback tour, shot in the neck while trying to have honest discourse, makes it all that much more imperative. The left's knee-jerk defenses and outright celebrations in the wake of the cold-blooded murder, alongside a media blitz of equivocating headlines and both sides' false equivalences, have ripped the mask off for millions of people. I'm telling you, a bunch of normal people, not politically active, have finally realized that words they're not tools for clarity for these people. They're actually just weapons of mass deception, twisted to sanitize violence and shield ideologues from accountability. We had so-called pastors denying that it was an assassination, to viral posts hailing the shooter as some sort of hero. We had people claim that it was karma, and for what? Saying things that you don't agree with? We had people claim that his words, his speeches, I don't even know how to describe their point on this one. It's too intellectually hollow. Basically, that if you spread divisive and hateful messages, then you can't be surprised when you get murdered. Yeah, so again, say things we don't agree with, and you have to expect to be shot. Do these people even hear themselves? But then they tried shifting the focus. The left came out and said, wait, we're actually the real victims here, claiming the Jimmy Kimmel situation is political persecution. They freaked out more about Jimmy Kimmel losing his show for 3 days, than they did about a political assassination. Now, if that ridiculous claim is the shot, well, here's the chaser. They also used it as a way to shove free speech in your face too. Yeah, 1 minute they're saying that you should be murdered for speech, and the next moment they're clamoring on about how they're actually free speech absolutists. They made that change in less than 24 hours. It's unbelievable. But don't fall for their tricks, alright? Don't give in to the political amnesia. They want you to memory hold the last 10 years, just like they did. But we remember the censorship regime. You're up against people that have no principles. They simply weaponize your morals and your principles against you when it's advantageous to them. So when these ghouls start talking about the Constitution or free speech, just know they're gaslighting you. They don't believe in any of this stuff. Typically, they just use it as a shield against accountability, in whatever fashion. But yeah, let's get back to them subverting language, because it's as interesting as it is important. They're waging a calculated war on reason itself. It's, contempt for the truth in the name of power. In the political realm, everything is about bending facts to fit preconceived narratives. That's it. George Orwell warned that words are instruments of control, and the establishment apparently took 1984 as some kind of how-to manual. We're seeing a dangerous pattern. Media and establishment journalists' main goal appears to be simply to erode empathy and evade scrutiny. That's it. You know this guy, Mike Benz? He shows a lot of this stuff. They actually hold workshops and strategize on how they can pull this off. It's the deliberate and strategic erosion of civil discourse. Now, the real kick in the nuts with that is that all that shit was funded by you, basically, the taxpayer. But yeah, let's get back to the language idea. Philosophically, it echoes Nietzsche's view of language as a mask for the will to power. And I'm going to show you how it applies to media coverage in a second. But first, Friedrich Nietzsche, a 19th century German philosopher. Well, he argued that language is not a neutral tool for conveying truth, but a human construct shaped by power dynamics. In works like Beyond Good and Evil and On the Genealogy of Morality, he described the will to power as a fundamental drive in human nature, a desire to assert influence, control, or dominance over others, whether consciously or subconsciously. Language, in Nietzsche's view, often serves as a mask for this drive, cloaking self-interest, ideology, or ambition in the guise of objective truth or moral righteousness. And yeah, I think that sums up the collective media response pretty damn well. It's all narrative control instead of, revealing reality. Some outlets have been criticized for framing the assassination as campus unrest or avoiding terms like political violence to downplay the ideological motivations or to protect certain narratives. And that selective language right there can obscure the event's gravity, serving the agenda of those who wish to control the public's perception. Right? Sums it up pretty well. Now it also works for the reaction too. The posts on social media, the videos, the celebrations are all cloaked in fake virtue. And really, that's typical. They cloak all their power grabs in some sort of fake virtue. It's a playbook. From people claiming the shooter is a hero to others claiming that it's a consequence of Kirk's rhetoric. Well, that illustrates how language can be twisted to reframe a clear act of violence as something less severe, perhaps to deflect blame or to justify ideological stances. Nietzsche would see that as language masking the will to power, using words to assert influence over public opinion, sidestep accountability, or even to celebrate the act without explicitly endorsing it. But when words are used this way, they become tools for power rather than truth. Nietzsche warned that such misuse erodes trust in our shared reality, as people wield language to dominate rather than to communicate. Yeah. Side note, we clearly don't live in a shared reality anymore. You need to question everything. The media framing, the narratives, the official stories, in this situation and in every situation. The fact is, people say we're in a post-truth world, but that's not exactly true. We're in a moment where you have to do the legwork yourself. Fact-check everything, cross-reference, question those in power, seek deeper meanings. And always remember, the devil's in the details. Strip away the framing, the narratives, all of it, and you can still get to the truth. In our era, truth still exists. It's just, I don't know, hard won. It requires you to question the motives behind the words. Peel back the mask and find reality. Everyone has an agenda, remember that. You know, Charlie Kirk often said, when people stop talking, that's when violence begins. It's true, we have to foster real debate, the same way Charlie Kirk did. Without dialogue, these camps retreat back into their echo chambers, where language becomes even more weaponized. Cross-aisle conversations force accountability, as each side must defend their words with reason, not just ideology. And I know, that's a tough thing to do while people are getting shot in the neck, but we have no choice. If we don't keep trying, then we're going to pay the ultimate price. Trust gone, escalating violence, and the collapse of a shared reality. Now, I think we're already there, but if we don't try to stop this now, we're never going to get it back. So, let's talk about the societal cost, because in my view, unchecked deception runs parallel to political violence. Solve one, solve the other, without seeking for the truth. This cycle of rhetoric and retaliation is just going to lead to even more tragedies, and I don't think many people could disagree with that. But alright, let's talk about assassination culture, and I quote, "The term assassination culture has gained traction as shorthand for the growing normalization of political violence, targeted killings, and the celebratory rhetoric within progressive and far-left spaces. It was coined prominently in the wake of high-profile attacks like the attempts on Donald Trump's life or the killing of the healthcare CEO Brian Thompson. It exploded into public discourse following the assassination of Charlie Kirk. Now, Charlie Kirk himself had warned about this phenomena earlier in a social media post, citing polling from the Network Contagion Research Institute that showed over 50% of self-identified liberals viewed violence against figures like Trump or Elon Musk as quote-unquote somewhat justified. Now, this concept isn't just alarmist hyperbole, it's rooted in observable patterns of rhetoric that escalates from demonization to justification of lethal acts, often amplified by media figures and online communities. As one analyst noted post-Kirk, the online celebrations of his death align with an emerging assassination culture and rising appetite for political violence." End of quote. And yeah, that's clearly true. However, at its core, this culture thrives on a feedback loop, right? Inflammatory language frames political opponents as existential threats, Nazis, fascists, parasites, which in turn justifies preemptive violence. This isn't fringe. It's increasingly mainstream through social media, where posts hailing assassins as heroes garner thousands of likes and shares. Yeah, so on the left, they went from deplatforming and debanking people they disagreed with, and are now endorsing flat-out murder. Clear radicalization. But there's something else happening too. You can see this with left-wing personalities, political streamers, and legacy media stations like CNN or MSNBC. Really, any show that claims they're a part of the quote-unquote resistance. Well, these people often find themselves in some sort of arms race with their audience, where boundary-pushing rhetoric isn't just tolerated, it's actually rewarded with viral engagement, donations, and loyalty. This dynamic with their audience creates a psychological reinforcement loop. Viewers, radicalized by their own echo chamber, cheer on the most insane takes, pressuring the host to double down to sustain the dopamine hit of adoration. You see it all the time, and it's clearly represented in the data. When they try to be reasonable for a moment, the audience revolts. And when they frame conservatives as a threat to democracy or whatever, viewership rises. Psychologically, this follows addiction models in social psychology. They call it the Adoration Economy, and it rewards escalation. A viewer might start with cheers for punching Nazis and then graduate to justifying assassinations as some sort of justice. Over time, this continues to ramp up. What begins as calls to disrupt events evolves into endorsements of direct action. Yeah, we've heard that phrasing before, direct action against anybody who stands against them. And it culminates in real-world acts of violence like the Kirk shooting. We've seen this many times now. These recent assassinations always give a nod to the media's framing, claiming they're fighting fascists or whatever, often carving these talking points onto the bullets themselves,
Now, you see, when your identity is defined by society, you cannot resist it. You don't have the knowledge, you don't have the wisdom, you don't have the resources to understand that something's being put over on you. You cannot but help believe the definition of you as a free agent. But you believe yourself to be a free agent as a result of not being free. That is to say, of being hopelessly unable to resist society's identification of you.
There is another very important phase of warfare. It has as its target not the body, but the mind of the enemy.
The target of psychological warfare is against the enemy's mind.
It is words and ideas.
The ammunition used by Psywar.
But let's get into the roots of radicalization. This assassination culture didn't emerge in a vacuum, alright? It's really the culmination of a really long radicalization arc on the left, fueled by movements like Black Lives Matter, the George Floyd riots of 2020, and the resurgence of Antifa. So yeah, those events normalized violence as a tool for quote-unquote justice. They shifted from protest to property destruction and assaults on political speech. So the riots in 2020, $2 billion in damages across 140 cities, with Antifa-linked groups coordinating arson and looting. There were also dozens of murders too. Antifa, once a West Coast fringe, it actually exploded post-2016, blending with BLM to form autonomous zones like Seattle's Chaz, where violence ruled for weeks. But by 2025, data shows that Antifa tactics like infiltrating protests, doxing opponents, influenced a 30% rise in left-wing attacks on political figures. And then, of course, we have the college campuses, which act as radicalization hubs. Yeah, universities have become incubators for political violence, with grievance studies, ethnic studies, gender studies, stuff like that. It breeds Antifa ideology. You have professors like Nathan John at Midwestern State University, who has openly called for strangling cops, capitalists, and politicians, while Stanford's David Palumbo co-founded the campus anti-fascist network to fight fascism via disruption. At the University of Pennsylvania, Huda Fakerdine renamed courses to Resistance Literature amid Gaza protests, and she admitted to radicalizing students against genocide narratives that frame America as quote-unquote evil. Yeah, this fosters a revolutionary mindset in these students. A 2025 Brookings report notes campuses as breeding grounds for left-wing extremism, where young minds are taught systemic evil demands upheaval, echoing the 1960s Weather Underground. This college-to-extremist pipeline turns impressionable students into activists who view violence as moral imperatives, with professors as the enablers, clear as day. The old saying, we don't want thinkers, we want workers. Well, now that's changed a little bit. It's now we don't want workers or thinkers, we want mindless activists. Yeah, that's where we are now. But to finish up, let's talk about the healthcare CEO assassination, the Luigi Mangione case. And the reason is because this exemplifies assassination culture's grip. So on December 4th, 2024, the 26-year-old Ivy League grad executed healthcare CEO Brian Thompson in Manhattan, firing shots engraved with deny, defend, and depose, which is a nod to insurance industry critiques. Mangione's manifesto decried parasitic corporations, echoing leftist grievances from Occupy Wall Street to BLM's anti-capitalist wing. Yeah, that dude became some sort of weird folk hero to the left. And so, on September 16, 2025, a Manhattan judge dismissed the terrorism charges, reducing it to second-degree murder, which is insane, because it was clearly premeditated. But anyway, the crowds outside the courthouse were cheering, hugging, and waving Free Luigi signs. You can see it on the video. On X and Reddit, Free Luigi trended with 50,000 shares, and over 60% of the top posts supported the killing. And it's the same exact phenomena with Charlie Kirk, where the killer cites leftist tropes and people online cheer it on as it normalizes the act even more. And the thing is, the media is not out there condemning the hero worship either. They excuse it. But let's tie everything together. Philosophically, this trajectory also evokes Nietzsche's will to power, okay? Where language and violence mask a deeper drive to dominate, eroding truth for ideological conquest. They've psyoped these people into thinking assassinations equal justice. As they say though, history repeats, because it also kind of parallels the French Revolution's descent. What once began as Enlightenment ideals against tyranny devolved into the Reign of Terror, where guillotines claimed 17,000 lives amid cheers for virtue via blood. Robespierre's cult of violence, justified as purifying the nation, mirrors today's hero worship of Mangione or Charlie Kirk's killer, rationalizing murder as a revolutionary necessity. And people better start getting ahead of this right now, because if it's left unchecked, we're on a path straight to hell. Now, how do we avoid it and put a stop to this mind virus? I don't know. I suppose the path to redemption includes us reclaiming discourse through accountability. You have to defund radical campus programs, prosecute incitement equally, and foster Socratic dialogue over slogans. Because without it, as Charlie Kirk foresaw, the ticking time bomb explodes, leaving not revolution, but ruins in its place. Once again, this is HelioWave. If you like the content, like, comment, and subscribe. Share the video if you want to. If you're in a position to, consider subscribing on Locals, or you can use PayPal. As always, make sure you disobey those true fascistas. And of course, I do hope you have a good night.